Okay, welcome to this process video. So what the heck is this? Basically, I set out to create a dice tower that was very Elven Tolkien inspired in its design, and I had a pretty good idea in my head of how I wanted the thing to look and be constructed. It was just a matter of actually designing it and laying it out in Illustrator so that I could cut it with my laser cutter. So this whole part that you're seeing right now is me working in Illustrator, and it took about an hour to actually do all of this, but it's been sped up and compressed down to just over 4 minutes long, so enjoy that. I started out by collecting a bunch of photo reference that felt like the sort of design that I had in mind. I wanted to put a Tolkien-style tree on the side of the tower and did a bunch of digging on Google Images because there's lots of different versions of the Tolkien tree designs. So basically I looked around until I found a version that I felt would not only work for what I had in mind, but would also translate well into vectors. I wanted the top of the tower to have this big arched ornate shape, and I wanted the corners to have these bits that kind of stick out. Once I had the tree done, I moved on to the arched tops, and I used these Gothic church windows and these sort of shapes to get the ideas I wanted out. The dice tower would have 4 sides that were all basically the same fundamental design with little tweaks to the front and the back. I split it up in my head to the 2 sides that would be mirrors of each other, and the front and back, the front being where the opening is in the bottom. That's where the dice roll out of the tower. Before I go any further, I want to explain some of what the color coding that I've got going on in this image means. You'll notice that some of the lines are red while others are blue. The blue lines are going to be using a lower power setting on the laser so that instead of cutting through the wood, it only etches the lines into it. So basically the lines are drawn onto the surface while the red lines will cut through the wood. I also had to take a detour to work out exactly how I was going to be attaching these 4 sides together, and also work out how exactly the flying corner extensions were going to be attached. This was probably the most mentally taxing part, as I really had to try and picture in my head, and a lot of this was practically guesswork as I thought it would fit together, but I wasn't 100% convinced it was going to work. I also knew from the beginning that this tower was going to have 2 layers of wood glued together to add depth and detail to the design. So I was working out the design, including the little corner bits, with both layers in mind. So anyway, one of the most important parts of the dice tower that makes it function is that there are these little platforms that zigzag on the inside so that the dice get rolled around and randomized. So that's what I focused on next. The inside pieces had to be the proper width and also have notches on the sides where they could fit in and be held in place by the 2 sides. I also used the knowledge that there would be 2 layers of wood to plan out where the notches would be in hopes that they could be hidden most of the time by the top layer of wood. After I had the basic structure of one side solidly planned out, I actually started working on what would be different between the sides in the front, where the opening would be. I also adjusted the 2 flying corner pieces so that at the front they wouldn't interfere with the extension that I knew would be coming out from the 2 sides. So, with lots of small details and tweaks and working out layers until I'd finally gotten to a point where instead of just designing the pieces, I had to instead start laying them out and making sure they would actually fit on the cut material. Now this whole thing is being cut from 1/8 inch plywood, and I get that in sheets of 12 by 24. And I start this way intentionally so that I can work out my space better and try and make sure I'm not making things larger than I can actually cut from material. So anyways, I took all of the pieces that I had and I started sort of Tetrising them around the space available. In the end, it became obvious that I wouldn't be able to get all of the pieces onto a single sheet, but I did manage to get it all laid out so that it fit onto 2 sheets of wood. So finally out of Adobe Illustrator, and now I'm on to the computer that I actually have hooked up to my laser cutter. You can see that after exporting the vectors into my laser cutter software, it has included the red and blue color coding. Just as I described before, the red is used for cutting while the blue is just etched. Since this is done entirely in vectors and no raster engraving is included, it's actually a pretty fast process. But like I said, it wouldn't fit all onto one sheet, so it has to go twice. It's kind of fascinating to watch the laser cutter go, and this is sped up, which I think is actually even a little bit more interesting, but even just standing there in person and watching the thing as it traces these vector lines is always really kind of fascinating. I use a radial hand sander, and I start with 250 grit sandpaper. If I'm aiming to get something really smooth, I'll work my way up to 400 grit sandpaper and then all the way up to 600, although usually I won't do that unless I'm sanding polyurethane. So the first step was to start gluing the 2 layers of each of the 4 sides together. The most difficult part were the little zigzag platforms on the inside, because they just kept popping out of place as I would get one thing into place and then another thing would pop out, and then I'd get that into place and then something else would pop out, and it was really kind of frustrating and tedious. And ta-da! It's the prototype, so it could be a lot prettier, and in any future iterations I actually intend to make it prettier. I already think I'm gonna have like 2 different colors of stain, like maybe the bottom layer is gonna be a dark stain, and then the top stuff and the corner bits that stick out, those are gonna be a really light stain. And I really wanna like put several coats of polyurethane and make this whole thing like really shiny. In any case, I'm actually really happy with how this whole thing turned out, because this was so much a shot in the dark. I had no clue if I was even going to be able to make this thing work, and if I did make it work, I wasn't sure how sturdy it was going to be, but it's actually really sturdy. The thing does not feel wobbly or shaky at all. It is firm, and I am confident that it would not fall apart even if I dropped it on the floor. All in all, I think that it turned out really great. The assembly process was really kind of a huge pain in the butt, but I already think I know how I would make it slightly less of a pain in the butt. So I think the next time I make one of these, I'm gonna do things in a slightly different order, and hopefully that will make it a little less complicated. I already know I intend to like give these as gifts to a couple people, so hopefully over the next couple processes of putting them together, I will get it sorted out and make it nice and streamlined. And anyway, I guess that's it. I think I'm done. If I get a version of it that's all shiny and polyurethaned and stained and nice, I'll probably post an update. In any case, that's it. Yeah, I'm done. So I hope you enjoyed this. I'm not sure if it's really educational at all. It's not like I'm teaching people how to do this. I'm just kind of showing how I did it. But, you know, maybe you'll learn something anyways.